Hi, I'm Karen, and this is from a course at the university, an intro to English grammar. And today we're going to talk about discourse function and declaratives specifically, and then embedded questions as well, because they look a lot more like declaratives. Okay, so first of all, let's talk a little bit about the difference between a clause and a sentence. Okay, so a clause is a unit of language that has both a subject and a verb. And usually that subject includes some sort of, it can include like a whole phrase, right? So it can have more than just one noun. And then the verb phrase often has more than just one verb, right? But we do have instances like I saw or I lived where we could just have two words. Okay, so in general, when we're thinking about a clause, it's going to have a subject and a verb. If a clause is independent, it can stand on its own, and it's called an independent clause. So simple sentences like Paris came late, and Paris in this case is a person, right? Paris came can also be a sentence all by itself, so Paris came late can stand by itself. When we add something else to it, that part can't stand on its own, and that's a dependent clause. So here we have two clauses in this sentence. Paris came late, and then his car broke down. Okay, and because his car broke down, is unable to stand on its own, and so it's the dependent clause that hooks up with the independent clause. Okay? So a sentence then can be defined as a unit of language containing one or more clauses. We can have more than one clause in a sentence. Here are a couple of examples. Okay, so let's decide whether these have one clause or two clauses, and if they're a sentence or not. Okay, so Paris came late, we've already said is one clause, and it is also a sentence. Okay, Paris came late because his car broke down. We have two clauses, an independent one, Paris came late, and because his car broke down, and together these two make a sentence. Okay, in number 3, Mary does not take her uniform off after school. We actually only have one clause, so even though this is a longer sentence, we still only have one subject and one verb, and so this is a one clause sentence. When we look at number 4, he went to the party, but I stayed home. We again have two clauses here. We have two subjects, he and I. So he went is one, and then I stayed is the second one. So here we have two clauses that are joined together to make a sentence. Okay, so the clause types that we have. So in English, right, when we're talking about clause types, so we're looking at subject and verb, and then the way we put those together has to do with the different functions that they can perform. Okay, so we have declaratives, interrogatives, imperatives, and exclamatives. Okay, and we're going to look at all of those in detail. So discourse function is how our book talks about it. So we'll talk a lot about function, which is how is it working. Okay, function has to do with the actual impact that the sentence has on the world. So either telling someone to do something, asking for something, getting someone to do something, okay, or making a request. So here's an example. Would you come to my house for dinner on Saturday? So this is the function of this sentence is to make a request. It's asking a question. If we look at the structure of the sentence, it's actually a yes or no question where the answer could be yes, I would come, or no, I cannot come. But the function of it is to try to get someone to actually do something. Okay? The second sentence, I now pronounce you man and wife, is a causal sentence. So it's causing something in the world to happen. So it's not just saying something, but it actually has legal ramifications as well. Okay, and the relationship between its structure and its function is not as simple as you might think. Okay, it's actually what causes a lot of confusion in language. Okay, so declarative clauses or sentences. Declaratives related to the word declare, so they generally are giving information. Their typical word order is subject, verb, and an optional object, right? So it depends on the verb for whether the object is going to be there or not. If the verb is intransitive, then we don't have to have an object. If it is transitive, then we have to have an object. And if it's ditransitive, we could have two objects, a direct and an indirect object. So let's look at these sentences. Okay, the cat ate the dog's food. Mushrooms grow in damp soil. The house needs a new roof. All of these are just giving us information that's out there in the world. So it's just giving us information, and that's what a declarative sentence does. And that's pretty much the end of our talking about what declarative sentences look like, because they're that simple. Okay, they should end with a period, and that's what they look like. Okay, let's look at a couple of less clear examples. Okay, here are a couple of examples. Bill is my friend. Rarely do I see a horror movie. Are these examples of declarative clauses? Yes, it's just giving us information. Do they have subject, verb, object, word order? Well, this is where it starts to get a little bit trickier because we have some special cases with these two sentences. In the first one, Bill is my friend, we have a linking verb is instead of an action verb. And so really we have a subject and its complement instead of a subject, verb, object. Okay. In the second one, rarely do I see a horror movie, when we use a word like rarely, which does kind of a partial negation, then we actually, when we put it up front, we have to do an inversion, and if there is no helper verb, we have to add do support. So the original sentence might be something like, I see a horror movie, that's the original declarative, or maybe it's I do see a horror movie, but more likely we're going to say I see a horror movie, and when we add rarely, we have this inversion that happens with the subject and the helper. So we have helper, subject, verb, and then the rest of the sentence. Okay. So are they examples of declarative clauses? Yes. Do they have subject, verb, object, word order? Well, not exactly. Okay. Let's talk about embedded questions. So I have a whole other presentation about the rest of questions, but embedded questions I put here with declaratives, mostly for space. Okay, and for what they look like. So embedded questions are used when a subordinate clause is asking for information or expressing doubt. So when we talk about a subordinate clause, that's a dependent clause. So it needs another clause to go with it. But what happens is we're using a question in that subordinate clause and then hooking it with a declarative statement. Okay. So, for example, if I am thinking about my friend who wanted to go to a party, my knowledge about whether she went, it might be unclear. I could say something like, did she go? Yes, no question. Okay? But if I'm expressing how I'm thinking about it, I might say something like, I wonder if she went. Okay? So there's something about this second part, right? There's the first part, which is I wonder, which is a declarative, I'm giving information. But if she went, right, has something to do with like, did she go? So it has a type of a question or an interrogative function that happens there. So it's an interrogative clause that's inside of a dependent or inside of an independent clause, I wonder. Okay, let's look at some additional examples. Okay, so we're going to look at how to form them first. So we can use yes, no's with if or whether. We can use WHs. We can use WHs as the beginning of the clause, okay? And we don't invert the subject and the verb. So you'll see in other questions that we do a lot of inversion, but here's some examples, okay? So the question, what did she say? But when I embed that inside of the declarative, it's I wonder what she said. So we still have what, the question word, and there's still some sort of a feeling of it being a question. But it's embedded inside this other statement. And so notice the punctuation. When it's a true interrogative, we use a question mark. When it is this embedded question format, then we use a period. Okay. We also notice the inversion, and we actually lose the do support. We don't have to have the do support in this situation. Okay, here's another question. Did she pass the exam? And we might phrase that as something like this. She doesn't know whether she passed the exam. Okay, so again, she passed the exam ends up in regular word order, okay, with a period. Can they ride with us? They are wondering whether or not they can ride with us. Okay, now, if we look at these sentences, let's think about how can we change them. Okay, so we're embedding them inside the larger sentence. So why did they change the date? I wonder why they changed the date. Are they still friends? Do you think that they are still friends? Okay, I can also use that as part of the clause. Okay, I wonder when this job will be finished. Do you think I am still in the running? Did the class meet yesterday? I wonder if the class met yesterday. Okay. Actually, let me go back. Do you think I am still in the running? That's actually just a question with an embedded question. Okay. So I wonder if I am still in the running would be the embedded question. Okay. So how do we punctuate them? Well, we pretty much punctuate them with a period, right? So the question is going to have a question mark, but when we embed it inside the other phrase, then we're going to have a period. Okay. So here is a little bit of prescriptive rule, okay? So trying to decide whether we are going to do question mark or period. So I wonder if she was feeling well yesterday, period. Okay, embedded question. Did you see that? Question mark. What did you think of the movie? Question mark. Do you sincerely think that we should continue knowing that the course we've taken hasn't proven fruitful in the least degree so far? Well, the main clause here is a question. Do you sincerely think? So it should be a question mark. I doubt whether he ever knew what he was doing. Period. And this is one, for me, the last one actually makes me go, ooh, is that a period or is that a question mark? Okay. And in number 3 or in number 4, where we have such a long phrase or many clauses put together, when we put these clauses together, then that, just like subject-verb agreement being more distant, it actually can confuse us for whether we should end it as a question or a period in our speaking intonation, right? And also in our punctuation. So here are our answers. Okay. And what do you think we should use for this one? Why is there so much poverty in the world when the United States has so much extra money? After all, Americans just throw money away on things like fast food every day. Ooh, what is it that makes this one complicated? Well, we have a number of clauses or a number of subjects and verbs that are joined together, and it seems like we have a question at the beginning and a statement at the end. So one possibility would actually be to split this sentence into more than one sentence, right? And even though we're splitting it, we still have multiple clauses, okay? So we split the first part into a question. Why is there so much poverty in the world when the United States has so much extra money? Question mark. After all, Americans just throw money away on things like fast food every day, period. Okay, how do we know whether we should use if or whether? Well, native speakers of English often use both, and we kind of use them interchangeably. Okay, so I wonder if you have room for one more in your car, or I wonder whether you have room for one more in your car. And I actually have kind of a funny feeling in my mental grammar that I want to always say whether or not you have room for one more in your car. For some reason, I have trouble with the word whether. Okay, so here's our prescription. In formal and general usage, if is used for conditions, and whether usually with or is used, though not consistently, in indirect questions. Okay, the formal English if is not used with or. In informal English, whether is rarely used. Okay, if is a subordinating conjunction. Whether occurs in 3 situations: in an indirect question, to express doubt, or to express alternatives. Okay, so this does explain a little bit, right? In informal English, I don't use whether very often, and so when I'm trying to put it together in my brain, my mental grammar is like, that's not really part of our vocabulary. So in other words, prescriptivists are telling us that we should only use whether for embedded questions. Okay, and that goes against what my mental grammar tells me, which it actually prefers if instead of whether. Okay, but the prescription is we should use whether for embedded questions. Okay, thanks.